Not only have Moza Racing just released one of the best Formula style sim racing wheels, the FSR, they've also released a completely new budget direct drive bundle on the same day. The R5 Racing Simulator bundle that I'm going to look at here is a complete sim racing bundle featuring everything you need to get started sim racing. Before I go any further, I just want to thank Moza for sending this product out early, so I've had a decent amount of time racing with this bundle to create this review. But rest assured, this review is all my own opinion, and I'm going to share both the good and bad about this bundle. Inside the rather large box, you'll find a brand new steering wheel known as the ES wheel. Then there is the small, new direct drive R5 wheelbase, and you'll also find a 2-pedal set called the SRP Lite pedals. And finally, there's also a table clamp included, which really points to this being more of a casual sim racing product. With a price tag of $599, this bundle is really setting its sights on the more casual sim racing market, and those who are maybe upgrading from a Logitech G923 and looking to get into a direct drive ecosystem. Moza seem to really be targeting buyers who be considering products such as the Fanatec GT DD Pro bundle or the Thrustmaster TGT2 bundle. Both of those competitor products feature a very similar offering while asking for around $100 to $200 more. And if you want to check this product out yourself, I've dropped some links in the description below. I'm going to start with the R5 wheelbase, as that's probably the most intriguing part of this whole bundle. It's essentially a slimmed down version of the popular R9 wheelbase. The R5 uses a similar form factor, although a bit stumpier, and utilises the same design philosophy. The main difference is that the smaller R5 wheelbase creates 5.5 Nm of torque, which is a step down from the 9 Nm found in the R9. And it is safe to say that you can feel the difference. The exterior design is remarkably similar to the R9, utilising the same shape and the same grooves on each side, but there are a few differences. There is the stumpier overall design, making the R5 a lot shorter than the R9, and the quick release shaft is also much shorter than that on the R9. On the rear of the R5 you'll have a set of connectivity ports, although these also differ from the ports on the R9. The R9 has a port for an e-stop, which the R5 doesn't, and there's a completely different power input port. The top of the R5 features pre-drilled holes for the optional screen to be attached, and underneath there are 4 mounting holes, although these holes are laid out differently to those on the R9 due to the reduced footprint. One of my biggest concerns when unpackaging this wheel was any potential overheating issues. The larger R9 wheelbase does get warm during extended use, as there are no cooling fans within these small direct drive bases, but it never got too hot to the point where I'd have to stop using it. And the R5 is a similar story. The motor isn't as powerful as the one in the R9, which does help keep temperatures down, and the metal body does a good job acting as a heatsink. You will notice warmth coming from it over a long play session, but it never gets too hot. As I mentioned earlier, there is a noticeable difference between the force feedback strength from the R5 compared to the R9. Everything feels a little softer than with the R9, and that's obviously down to the reduction to just 5.5 Nm of torque. Despite this step down, the force feedback is still incredibly detailed and can be strong enough to give you a bit of a workout. Where using the larger R9 wheelbase can sometimes feel like a wrestling match with an old 80s turbo era F1 car, this R5 feels much calmer, like driving the electronically assisted F1 cars of current day. Of course, I use that analogy loosely, as there isn't anything calm about driving the current era of F1 cars, but this wheelbase is essentially a toned down version of the R9. Direct drive force feedback is without a doubt a step up in both strength and fidelity compared to gear or belt driven wheels such as the Logitech G923 or Thrustmaster T248, and that makes this wheelbase the perfect gateway into direct drive sim racing. Moving on to the ES steering wheel that's also included in this bundle, and I have to say I'm not really a huge fan of it. That's mainly because I don't overly get on with these small bundled in steering wheels. Every sim racing company has a wheel just like this. Logitech with the G923, Thrustmaster with the T248, and Fanatec with the GT DD Pro wheel. And out of all of them, I'd have to rank this Moza ES around the middle of the bunch. I do still believe that Logitech has the cleanest design of the bunch with its simplistic yet modern design. Much like the wheels that I mentioned, this ES wheel features a lot of the same characteristics. Yes, there is a metal faceplate, much like the others, which is a nice touch, but that's surrounded by plastic across the top and bottom with some really plasticky feeling buttons. Across the top you do have a customizable rev bar, which is nice, and there are a good number of button inputs. The one big thing missing from the front of this wheel though is any form of rotary dial. It's always good to have a rotary encoder of some kind, even just one, as not only does it allow for a different form of input in game, it also raises the quality and aesthetic of the whole wheel, I reckon. There are two very large loose plastic buttons at the bottom of this wheel. One is a start button and the second being a radio button. One or both of these could have easily been replaced with a rotary encoder, like the one found on the cheaper Logitech G923. Also, a slightly confusing design choice is to have three buttons that are all labelled pretty much the same thing. You have the start button I mentioned, and then there's also another button called home and another labelled menu. In almost any sim racing game, those three commands are pretty much the same thing. You can simply ignore this and map the buttons to any in-game input you like, but it just seemed like a strange choice of wording to me. I do have to say that all of the buttons other than the radio and start buttons do feel good to engage with. They're all pretty firm with minimal rocking or movement and less pressing them, and the same applies to the D-pad, which also feels decent. Flipping the wheel over and you'll find a set of shifters, and this marks the first time that Moza has not included magnetic shifters on one of their wheels, and at this price point it is probably to be expected. The two shifters on this wheel are both constructed from metal, which is nice, as a few wheels at this price point opt for cheaper plastic shifters. And using these shifters feels very familiar. They have a very similar application to the Logitech G923 shifters. Despite not being magnetic, there's a good amount of resistance when pulling either shifter, and this should help to avoid any accidental shifts. And there is a nice satisfying click sound when you do fully activate either paddle. Although, with that said, there is a lot of additional travel in each shifter past the click point. Once the shifter clicks, you can still pull the shifter about another 10mm or so before it reaches its stopping point. It would have been a little nicer if this was fine-tuned a little more to stop closer to the activation point. Then there's the Moza quick release, which remains as fantastic as ever. This is the same quick release mechanism found on all Moza wheels, and it is quite frankly up there as one of the best on the market. It features a simple action to remove and reattach any Moza wheel, allowing for you to upgrade this steering wheel or interchange them in just a few seconds. Next, I want to talk about the SRP Lite pedals. In this bundle you get the 2-pedal variant included, with a third clutch pedal being an additional extra if you want a full 3-pedal set. These pedals take a similar form as the SRP pedals that I reviewed recently. From the front they don't look too much different, and you could be forgiven for mistaking them for the full-blown SRP pedal set. They utilise the same footplate and same all-metal pedal arm, but with a slightly different pedal faceplate. I actually really like the look of this pedal set, and despite the pedal faceplates being constructed from thinner metal, I probably prefer the styling of these compared to the brushed pedal plates on the SRP set. Things then take a bit of a turn when you examine each pedal individually, and that is because the brake pedal is almost identical to the throttle and clutch. While each pedal does utilise contactless Hall effect sensors, meaning less wear over time, and they are all constructed from pretty high quality metal, which are both very good things, the brake pedal in particular doesn't really resemble a brake pedal in any form. It uses the same linear application as both the throttle and clutch, and this really detracts from the overall feeling of braking. Each pedal uses a metal spring to provide resistance when pressing on them, with the brake using a slightly firmer, stiffer coil. This does provide a little more resistance than the throttle or clutch pedals, however there is still so little resistance in the brake that I can fully depress the brake pedal by simply pushing with one finger. And the spring design in the brake pedal doesn't allow for any progression on the brake as you start to push it harder. This really is a bit of a shame, as every other pedal set that I've mentioned in this price range does include some form of progressive brake. Some utilise a foam stopper or a spring and damper to achieve this. The one saving grace is that you can completely change the linearity curve of each pedal using Moza's Pit House software. This allows you to adjust the output curve for each pedal and is especially helpful with the brake. You can change the curve to allow for braking at the start or end of the pedal travel to be slower or faster depending on your preference. And using this setup, you can customize each pedal to your own liking and achieve some form of consistency. The final piece of this bundle is the included table clamp, which I do really like. This allows sim racers who maybe don't have a wheel stand or a full sim rig setup to quickly attach this wheelbase to your desk or a table and start racing. And the table clamp design is actually pretty good. The clamp hard mounts to the underside of the R5 wheelbase and angles the wheelbase upwards. This helps both visibility over the top of the wheelbase and creates a more realistic driving angle. The clamp features 2 clamping points on the underside with a very large area of adjustability, measuring around 8 cm. This should allow you to clamp your wheelbase to most desks and tables. It may be advisable to add some foam or cloth protection on the underside of your desk though, as the metal fasteners will indent your desk if fastened too tight. It would have been good if these were made from rubber or had some protection. Compatibility wise, much like all Moza products to date, this bundle is completely PC compatible, with each component working in every sim we tested it with. Importantly, the R5 wheelbase does have a port on the rear of the pedals to connect to. This could signal some form of console compatibility coming in the future. This is also hinted at with the buttons on the steering wheel, which utilise the classic Xbox configuration of A, B, X and Y. Now, this hasn't been confirmed yet, but I do have a sneaky suspicion that it may well be announced at a later date. Also, it's important to say that every part of this bundle can be used individually if required. The pedals can connect to your PC independently of the wheelbase, meaning you can opt to use different pedals or a different wheelbase. And because the wheelbase features the same Moza quick release as all other products, you can interchange steering wheels. So the question of whether you should consider this as your next or maybe your first sim racing setup is a tricky one. This bundle at its best is a very capable budget-friendly direct drive setup, which is really impressive to achieve at this price range. But at its worst, both the lack of any form of progressive brake pedal and some shortcomings with the steering wheel itself could relegate this bundle below other offerings at this price point. However, I do think the direct drive wheelbase really saves this whole bundle. The 5.5Nm wheelbase offers fantastic value and brings a good level of performance that is really unmatched by other budget sim racing wheels. The fact that you can upgrade this bundle over time to incorporate different steering wheels and different pedal sets will allow sim racers who are purchasing this as their first wheel or as an upgrade over a super budget wheel to grow over time. The foundations that the wheelbase provides are solid, and for that reason I could happily recommend this bundle.